we've already spoken about MySQLi, but it's also worth knowing what PDO is and why it exists within PHP. So PDO is another database extension and it's an abstraction layer, but it differs to MySQLi because it's not specifically tailored to working with MySQL servers and MySQL databases. Now obviously this series is covering MySQL. We're connecting to a MySQL server, issuing MySQL commands to get data, manipulate data and whatever else. PDO takes things a step further and allows a massive amount of flexibility. Now this flexibility comes in the form of a database wrapper that lets you connect to any database that's supported via the drivers that are installed within your PHP installation. So whether it's Microsoft SQL Server, Oracle, SQLite, ODBC, and there are a host of other different extensions or drivers rather you can install. So you might be wondering what the benefit to this is. Why would we want to use something that allows us to connect to lots of different databases? Why would we do this? And it's a good question. Now, let's say you start out building your application with MySQL. You build up a database with thousands and thousands of records, and within the code that you're writing yourself, you have lines and lines of code all using the MySQLi extension that we spoke about in the last video to work with your database. So now let's imagine that you either have to or you decide to make the change to another database solution. So for example, you change from MySQL to Microsoft SQL Server, although it's probably unlikely that you would do this. So you're now going to have to make changes everywhere that you've used the MySQLi extension, because the MySQLi extension will not connect to a Microsoft SQL Server database or a server. So you would use, you've been using the MySQLi extension to connect, query, access results, etc., etc. And this is going to be a massive pain. Now, let's imagine that you'd used PDO instead. Well, because PDO is an abstraction layer, it means that if you'd used PDO from the start, all you'd have to do is where you'd connected to your database or your server, all you have to do is switch over the driver that you want to use. So you would change this from MySQL to MS SQL. Specify the details for your Microsoft SQL server, so localhost, your username, your password, and everything would just work as normal because PDO isn't specifically tied to working with a particular database. It's defined at the level of connecting to the database, so it abstracts that functionality from lots of different databases. And that's the reason you have to install lots of different drivers depending on which databases you want to be supported, because each one will abstract that and bring it into PDO and allow you to work with it in a generic way. So you might be wondering now why in this series are we using MySQLi instead of PDO, since I've just touted the benefits of it to you. Well, it makes sense to start somewhere that will avoid confusion. So once you've understood the fundamentals of connecting and managing your database with the MySQLi extension, it won't be very hard to then start learning PDO, because what we're going to be doing is using the MySQLi extension in an object-oriented way. Now the point is, it's always best to know more than less. So MySQL is an excellent extension, it's powerful, it's fast, it provides great options for security, and there's absolutely nothing wrong with using it. So when people say to you, no, you should use PDO, say to them, well, I'd like to learn MySQLi before I use PDO, because then at least you've learned another technology, and when someone does require MySQLi and doesn't want the enormous breadth of PDO to be used within their application, let's say you're working on a job where it requires MySQLi, you know MySQLi, then you'd have to go and learn it again. So that's the difference between PDO and MySQLi, and it's good to know that they're both there. But obviously, as we've said, we're going to be focusing on the techniques we need to access our database using MySQLi first for the reasons I've already mentioned. And then you can go on and learn PDO additionally later on, which will add to your toolkit and make you ultimately a more powerful developer. So let's get started with actually accessing our database with PHP using the MySQLi extension.